Midjourney finally released their interpretation of inpainting just over a week ago. Obviously, this got me excited because inpainting has been one of those features that we've all been desperately waiting for. However, I didn't want to rush out a video without having sufficient time to properly test it. So that's why this video may seem a little bit late to the party. However, as useful as the feature may be, it's still far from perfect. And if you're struggling to make certain things work for you, then don't worry, you're not alone. So today I'll walk you through the good, the bad, and the ugly of Midjourney's new Vary Region feature. All right, so today I'm going to walk you through a number of different use cases and things you can do with Midjourney's new inpainting feature, which within their ecosystem is called Vary Region. Now, before we can actually do anything, you first need to make sure that you have activated remix mode. In order to do that, what you do is you enter /settings, and then you just make sure that this remix mode button is activated. With regards to the high variation and low variation mode buttons, I must admit that I'm not entirely sure yet to what extent they actually make a difference in this particular case when we use Vary Region. That is something that we'll have to discover as we go along and in the next couple of weeks. But for the purpose of this video, I just decided to stick with low variation mode. All right, so let's start off with our very first prompt. So for our first use case, we're going to look at adding and removing objects from an image. So let me start off with the following prompt, which is cinematic photography, astronaut exploring vast deserted landscape on distant planet Venus plus Mars, and then I add some parameters. Let's wait for these images to generate. All right, so let me just move myself over here to the side and let's have a look at these images. And sure enough, it's exactly what we would expect from this sort of prompt. We've got 4 really nice vast landscapes on some distant planet, and we've got our astronaut in each one of these images. Now, I think what we're going to do in this particular case, we're going to start working off of the bottom left one, simply because that's where the astronaut is most dominant. And let me just quickly upscale that image. And once we've done that, we can now start working on this image using Vary Region. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to remove our astronaut from the image. Now, I know it doesn't really make sense to first prompt an image that includes the astronaut just to remove him afterwards, but the point here is just to illustrate what you can do. So what we would do is we would hit the Vary Region button. It opens up this nice little window, which is quite neat actually, because I'm curious to see what Midjourney does with this, because they are working on a web UI, but it seems that this might actually be a good alternative for all of those who don't necessarily want to work within the web UI. Anyway, so what we're going to do next is we're going to pick one of these 2 buttons. So you've got the rectangle tool or the lasso tool. In this particular case, I think the rectangle tool will be fine. So what I'll do is I'll just select this area here, and I'm going to change my prompt to cinematic photography, deserted landscape on distant planet Venus plus Mars. Now, note that I've simply left out a whole bunch of stuff from the original prompt. I didn't really have to change all that much. I do like to keep the main elements that define my style, just to make sure that Midjourney and myself are more or less on the same page. And once we've done this, we simply hit this button here and wait for it to process. All right, and this is actually an excellent example of just how imperfect this feature still is. Remember, we selected the entire astronaut. We entered a prompt that did not make any reference to an astronaut or any other character, and yet even though Midjourney removed our original astronaut, it reinserted some type of character. Now, this is one of those things that most people on social media will not show you. They will mostly just cherry pick the best ones and show you what's possible, but rarely will they show you where Midjourney falls short. Now, this isn't a big issue because what we'll just do is we're just going to upscale one of these again. We'll take the bottom left one again, and once it's upscaled, we'll simply hit Vary Region one more time. And this time we'll select this character down here, and actually that might be not enough area. And we'll keep the exact same prompt and hit it one more time. Now this time around, I would expect that character to disappear, but who knows, we'll see. All right, excellent. So now we have these 4 images that look more or less the same. We've removed the character, we don't have an astronaut in the scene anymore, but now let's say we want to reintroduce some new objects. I want to insert some structures. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to upscale one of these images, and then once it's upscaled, I'll be able to hit the Vary Region button. And now let's say I want to place something around this area over here. Or actually, maybe that's not the best place to do it. I'm going to put it a little bit more to the distance over here and make it a little bit bigger instead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use cinematic photography, monolithic city-like structures in deserted landscape on distant planet Venus plus Mars. You see, again, we haven't changed much. The only thing I've really adjusted is that I've added this monolithic city-like structures element into the prompt. I'll hit the submit button and we'll wait for these to generate. All right, cool. So let's have a real quick look at these. And what you can see is we've successfully inserted these structures. I mean, we're not really sure what they are, but we've successfully inserted them into our scene. And this is exactly what the new Vary Region feature is actually quite good at. You can remove elements out of a larger scene, put in new elements in specific locations. It won't necessarily always work perfectly, but you can actually construct quite nice scenes this way. Now, one area where I find this to be a little bit more challenging is once you have a scene that is a little bit more condensed, where you've got a lot more going on in a much smaller space. So to demonstrate what I mean, let me show you this prompt. Interior architecture, photo of living room of luxury condominium in the Swiss Alps, earthy tones, warm, cozy. And let's have a look at what we get from these. Okay, so these are really nice, and they're exactly the type of images that you would expect from this kind of a prompt. Midjourney just gives us these really nice interior designs. Now, I'm going to work off of the bottom left one again, simply because I want to demonstrate something which I find a little bit frustrating. You can see that there's this little pillow or mini sofa-like object here in the bottom right corner. I'm not exactly sure what they're called, but anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to upscale number 3, and what I want to do is I want to remove this object. And this is something that, similar to what I showed you in the earlier example with the deserted landscape, this becomes very difficult to do with these interior designs. Or not very difficult, but a little bit annoying. So for example, I would hit the Vary Region button. I would then perhaps use the lasso tool this time. I would select this area where we have the pillow or the mini sofa. And what I would enter is something like carpet living room. Now, this is just an example of what you could do, but I just want to show you what happens if I do this sort of thing. Hey, sorry to interrupt you right smack in the middle, but I just wanted to share something with you. YouTube is an absolutely amazing way to discover and learn new skills, just like the video that you're watching right here. However, as you discover these videos and tutorials, you're never quite sure when they were recorded, whether they're still relevant, and how they fit into the bigger picture of learning to use and control Midjourney. So if you're looking to get a comprehensive training in the foundations of prompting in Midjourney, then I highly recommend that you check out my video course at mastersofmidjourney.com, which gives you a comprehensive education in learning how to control Midjourney and how to prompt with intent. Hit submit. All right. And actually, in this particular case, it turned out pretty okay. So we have 2 images where the pillow has disappeared. The other 2 images, it hasn't quite worked yet. And very often what I've experienced is that none of the images will actually work, simply because I can't really explain what it is, but it seems that the more closely positioned the different objects are, the more difficult it is to remove them. And my suspicion is that this is because Midjourney is actually not only looking at the area that we've selected, but in fact, I think it's actually taking into account a lot of the context of the entire image, and to an extent that might be a lot more than we would like it to do. So in this case, it worked out great, but let's say it did not. Well, what I would then do is I would simply upscale, one of the images that was the closest to what I was trying to get to, and I would then hit the Vary Region button one more time. And then very often what I've noticed is if you select a wider area, then things will work out a little bit better. So if you don't follow the contours of the object too closely, but instead you actually select a much larger area around it. Now this obviously won't always work because there might be other objects in the way, but in this case, we can do it. And so what I would enter is something like empty living room floor, and then maybe use a negative prompt here. I'm honestly not sure whether these negative prompts work within this feature, but we might as well give it a try. I hit submit. And this is precisely what I meant. We have another look, and 2 of these worked out fine, whereas in the others, it did exactly the opposite of what we wanted to do. Now, of course, we got 2, which are fine, so I should be happy with this, but it just goes to show you that we don't actually have as much control over this feature yet as we would probably like. And I'm sure there's a lot of fine-tuning that the Midjourney team still needs to do. All right, so now let's have a look at something else that you can do with this new feature. All right, so I'm going to start off with a new prompt, which is just slightly different from what we used before. Interior architecture, photo of living room of luxury condominium in Santorini, Greece, earthy tones, warm, cozy summer, bright sunlight. Let's generate these, and then we'll see which one we'll pick. All right, so before I actually open these, I gotta say, I'm in turbo mode right now, and for some reason, Midjourney just pushed me into fast mode. I was just a bit surprised that this was generating really, really slowly compared to what I'm used to, and this is a big question mark for me. I don't know why this is happening. Maybe some of you guys know, and if you do, please put it into the comments, but this is a bit irritating. Anyway, let's have a look at the images, and these look beautiful. If you've ever been to Santorini, then you know that this is actually pretty close. If you have not, then you should go at least once in your lifetime. But what I really want to show you now is I want to show you how we're going to replace scenic elements within an image. So we are in Santorini, and the interior architecture is exactly what you would expect from that type of location. But what I want to do is I want to change the outside scenery to something that might look a bit awkward, but I just want to show you what this feature can do. So I'm going to pick one with lots of windows, which is the bottom left one again. It's interesting. Number 3 is the number of the day, it seems. And we'll wait for this to upscale. And once it does, we'll open the vary region feature. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah. And then I will select all of this, the entire area that shows anything that's on the outside. And I'm going to try to hit the contours this time because otherwise it'll produce some, well, relatively strange results. And actually, I messed up here. Let me add this as well. Then there's a window over here, which I'll also cover, and we'll do this one as well. Let me zoom out, and what I'll do is I'm going to use the following prompt: New York City skyline during sunset. Now, I know this interior design does not fit to New York City, but I just want to prove a point. I'll hit submit, and we'll wait for these to show us some nice new images. All right, let's open these up and have a quick look. And as you can see, while it may not work well in every single one of these, because some of these images look a bit strange, to be honest, it does seem to have put New York City into the horizon of our skyline, and it even filled in the other windows as well. And I know this looks out of place, but it just goes to show you that if you want to do something strange, it does work. Now, the one thing that bothers me about this, though, is that it does have its limitations again. So let's say I were to redo this one more time. So I'll hit the vary region button again. And this is very important. If you work off of the same image again, but you want to select something different, it's very important that you actually hit this undo button first until all of these selected areas disappear, because otherwise you're going to start processing on different areas at the same time. I made this mistake a couple times before, and then I had to redo the same prompt again and again. In this case, we're going to work off of the same area. And actually, what I might do is I might expand this a little bit more, just because it looked a bit weird just a second ago. And what we'll do is we'll pretend that the room ends over here. We'll just select all of this, and we'll add this space as well. But what I really want to show you is what happens when I enter a prompt like this: thick snowflakes falling, Swiss Alps. And what I'm hoping to see is a panorama or like a landscape of the Swiss Alps, and I want it to be snowing. And one of the things that I find frustrating about this is that the way the in-painting feature works is it's not as faithful to our prompts as if you were prompting an image directly. And this is important because it means that you do not have as much control as you might think. And I think it's taking into account a lot of the context of the total image, including some of the lighting, the furniture and everything. And it just then makes a decision to not give you what you want. So let me show you this. I'll hit submit. Okay, and let's have a closer look. And surprisingly enough, this time I actually got some snowflakes here on the left. They do look a bit weird, but on all my previous attempts, it just didn't want to work. But then again, if we look at the other three, it's like bright sunlight and like sunshine. There's not a single snowflake in sight. And even the one on the bottom left that has snowflakes, it doesn't really make sense because it has like it's blue skies and everything. So again, I think Midjourney is looking at the overall image, and based on what it sees, it then decides on how to interpret the prompt that you enter for the in-painting. And again, if you know this, if you understand this, then that's great, because then you can adapt to this. But it also means that you're being restricted in what you can do. And I find that a little bit disappointing, to be honest. Anyway, so that's enough for interior design. Let's move on to the next examples. Now, one of the things that you can use Midjourney's in-painting for now is a certain level of face swapping. It's not 100% the same thing as face swapping with other tools, but it comes pretty close. And let me show you with an image that we'll start off with: street photography, close-up portrait of a firefighter in full uniform. Let's quickly open these up. And as you can see, these are really great images. But what I want to do now is, let's say I've decided that I really like the face of the character on the top right, but I want to use the image of the character on the bottom right. Now, they don't look exactly the same. So what we're going to do is I'm going to upscale both of them, scale U2 and U4. And what we'll then do is we will copy the link. I really got to say, Midjourney is super slow today, and it's gotten worse over time. I don't really know why, but anyway. So I'm going to copy the link of the face that I want to use. And by the way, if you're not familiar with this toolbar down here, this is my Prompt-A-Lot Chrome extension, which makes prompting so much easier. If you want to grab it yourself, you're going to have to use this within the Chrome browser or a Chromium-based browser. This does not work directly within the Discord app, so you're going to have to use Discord within the browser. And you can grab this at www.promptalot.com/extension. Anyway, so I've copied the image URL of this face, and I'm going to go down here to the one where I want to face swap it into, and I will select vary region. And what I'll then do is I'm going to use the lasso tool to, well, actually, I don't necessarily need to use the lasso tool since this is actually pretty much square. So we can just do this with the square selection tool, and then we will paste this down here. This is the URL. And then I'll keep the rest of the prompt the same, to be honest, because I don't necessarily want to change anything else. So I'll hit submit. And if we open these up and then also show the original images next to these, then I think you'll notice that we've managed to inject most of the facial features of the, well, not the original image, but the one that we want to use. And we still have the overall composition and just the shot of the other image. Now, again, this is not 100% perfect, and it works best when the shape of both heads is similar. As soon as you have a face that has a very different shape as the other, or maybe even a long beard, then it becomes a little bit more tricky because it will take the facial features, but not necessarily the shape of the head, and then it just looks a bit weird. But anyway, this is something that definitely works pretty well, and I think it might be good enough for many, many different use cases. Now, I want to show you another thing that we can do with faces. Okay, so let's say we're happy with either one of these faces. I'm going to select maybe the top left one, and the only thing I want to change, though, is the facial expression, the emotion. This guy, for example, has a face that's perhaps a little bit too nice, and what I would rather do is I'd like him to look a bit more fierce and angry. So what I'll do is I'll hit vary region. I will once again, this time I might actually just use the lasso tool to select only the face. You don't necessarily need to do this. I'm just experimenting here on the fly, to be honest. And what we're going to do instead now is we're going to enter a few extra words, close-up portrait of angry firefighter. And at the end, I'll end upset, frustrated. This will still use the original reference image. I'll hit submit. And let's have a look at how this changes the facial expression of this character. All right, let me show you these real quick. And as you can see, it's taken still most of the facial features of the face swapped image. And the only thing it's done now is it's actually given the character an emotion. The man is very angry, he's frustrated, he's upset, his mouth is open. So this is something that is really great and gives you so much flexibility in terms of changing the faces of your characters in particular scenes and just making them look a bit different. And it's going to give you much smoother, much more polished images than anything that you could have done before. Now let me show you another thing that you can do with characters. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to enter a new base prompt, street photography, full body shot of fashion model walking through the streets of Amsterdam, autumn season. Let's generate these. All right, so let's open them up, and sure enough, they look great. This is the kind of image that you would have expected. But perhaps we want to change aspects of this character now. I'm going to select the top right one, U2, and I'm going to do a few things one after another. So first of all, what I want to do is I want to change the woman's hair color. So I'll hit the vary region button. I will now use the lasso tool just to make it as specific as possible. I will select all of the surroundings of her head, her face. Actually, I don't know whether I need to pick. I'm just going to, since I don't care about the face too much, I'm just going to select that one as well. And I'm just going to enter brunette, woman. And sure enough, this is still the same shot, same composition, but we now have a brunette in this image instead of a blonde. Now, let's say we're not fans of her outfit either, and we wanted to change this. Well, we could do that too. We could potentially give her a new set of pants, maybe even a new sort of shirt, maybe not a shirt, maybe a turtleneck instead. And you can slowly, bit by bit, change the entire outfit of this character. So I'll hit vary region one more time. And this time around, I'm going to select only her pants. And I'll bear in mind, we're going to mess up the hands here, unfortunately. But that's, whoops, sorry, I messed up here. We're going to mess up the hands, but that's fine because we can fix that afterwards as well. That's also another huge benefit of this new feature. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose aubergine chinos. Let's see what we'll get from this prompt. Okay, so unfortunately, the color didn't really get through in this attempt, except for the bottom right one maybe. But what it did do, it fixed most of the hands, which is excellent already. And I want to show you one more bit here because I really want to do the turtleneck. So I'll upscale U4. And I'll hit vary region one more time just to make our last change. I'll hit the lasso tool, and then I'll just select this whole section here up until just until her neck. Select all of this, and then what we'll say is we're going to take an ochre I mean, these colors really don't work together well. I mean, I'm just picking something to, make a point, but an ochre turtleneck. Let's submit that and have a look at what we get. Interesting. So again, we didn't quite get the color, which is interesting, honestly, because in most of my earlier attempts, it went really well. But this particular case, just kind of, it didn't mess up. We still have a nice turtleneck and it fits to the overall outfit, I guess. But if you wanted to get the right color, you may have to repeat this process multiple times until you actually get to that color. So in that sense, it's actually similar to using remix in, the classic scaffolding remix, where you would have to reinforce over and over again until you get to your result. And it looks like this is something you may have to do with these images as well. So this just shows you how you can actually mix and match an entire outfit. And I think this is going to be a huge game changer, especially for people who are working in the fashion industry, or you have an e-commerce store and you want to change like outfits of people. This is going to just blow people's minds. All right, so I now want to show you another not so great example. So in this example, I'm going to show you what happens when you try to replace a complete character and just switch them out with somebody else. So I'm going to enter the prompt street photography, 2 police detectives observing a crime scene. We'll generate these images. And again, these are images that we're used to. They look really, really great. But maybe I want to replace one of these characters with another character and not just swap out the face, but I actually want to replace like the gender. So this is a guy. These are 2 guys in both cases, I think. Maybe in the top left, that might be a woman. I'm not entirely sure. But what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to use the bottom left one here and replace the detective on the left with a female detective. So I'll hit the vary region button. And to make things a bit easier, I'll just select an entire section here. And I will replace the prompt with female police detective observing a crime scene. I'll submit this. And what I'm kind of expecting to happen is I might get a woman, but then probably she'll look really, well, not distorted, but just out of place, or the character will just disappear altogether. And yep, that's kind of what we're getting here. As we can see, it's going to take a little moment to finish. All right, and this is one of those frustrations that I have with this feature. Now, I must admit that in 2 of these, it actually worked quite well. So I'm not really sure what's going on today, because it seems that Midjourney might be fixing things in the background. But so the one in the bottom right actually looks pretty good. The one in the top left looks pretty good as well. But the other 2 now, like why? Like why? How does this character just disappear? And in my previous tests, I would literally have 4 images where the character would just completely disappear. I would like there would be nothing, or there might be a woman, but she would look really weird, like way too big or way too small, or just like with a cropped body. And so that makes it kind of difficult to work with this if you don't really know what you're going to get. It's way more random than what you would usually have with Midjourney. But anyway, so this is to show you what happens when you use this on an entire character. Now, before we finish off this video, I want to show you some really, really horrible examples of what happened in my earlier tests. And for this to work, I'm going to have to open up an image that I saved, and I'm going to show the prompt on screen just for you to see what I prompted. But we got this image of a crime scene in New York City. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to place a female detective, once again, somewhere within the scene as part of the greater scene. So what I did is I selected an area in the sort of left section of the image, like a rectangle, and then I used the following prompt: film still 40-year-old female detective with light brown long hair. That's all I entered, okay? And what I got was these images, which are just creepy. Like, what is this? Why? I prompted a woman, a female detective, and instead it placed these, what is this even? These are 4 creepy dudes with long hair. Their bodies are chopped off and kind of like cemented into the ground. Like, and I don't even know, why does this guy have like these neon lights over his body? So this was one of my earliest attempts with Vary Region, and I was a bit shocked because it felt like nothing is working. So what I did is I made another attempt, and then I used the following prompt: film still full body image of 40-year-old female detective with light brown long hair standing in street looking at crime scene in New York City. And what I got from that was the following image. So again, one of these actually looks pretty fine, the one on the top left, but she's kind of not looking at the crime scene. She's looking at me. But okay, I'll let that pass. The bottom left one, again, is a cropped woman. I don't know where that lighting is coming from either, because her face is clearly lit up. And then in the other 2 images, there's dudes, there's guys. Like how difficult is it to determine whether I want to see a woman or a man? So again, I think what's happening here is that Midjourney is using a lot more context from the overall image to the point where it's starting to mess around with what you have actually asked it to do. And I understand there's a fine line between, you need to find a balance in how to interpret what the person is prompting and, how to fit it into the overall image. But it feels like this feature still needs a lot of work. That being said, based on what I've shown you today, I think there is lots to be happy about because we're now finally able to fix small problems and make adjustments here and there, add stuff to a degree which just wasn't possible before. And even the face swapping, I know it's not perfect, but it is a big step forward and may allow you to create much more polished face swapped images than was possible before. All right, so that's it for today. This is my quick recap of everything that I've tested so far with Very Region, and I think there will be much, much more to look forward to in the next few weeks. Remember to check out the description for my Midjourney course, as well as a whole bunch of other free stuff. And yeah, I'll see you next week, and take care. Keep on learning.